Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Open Discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about the Disney live action with animation version of Pinocchio. So, this one came out, I want to say, and this one came out last year when all these Pinocchio films were coming out. If you haven't seen it, it's on Disney Plus. You can go check it out on Disney Plus and then come back here and see what we had to say about it. But let's go ahead and just jump right into this. This one, I was really happy, at least with the beginning, because we've all seen Disney movies, so we all know that they use the melody from, When You Wish for Upon a Star at the beginning of all their movies. And I was like, this is the one movie that this melody comes from. They better do something special. And they do. They have the melody play, and then they have it go right into Jiminy Cricket singing it as he comes floating into the screen, and then it fades away, and then we're into the movie. So, like, I really enjoyed that opening. That was pretty cool, and I thought that that was a nice little celebration of where these things have all come from.
Yeah, and it's definitely. I mean, it is the Disney made one, and it's a lot closer to the original Disney animation than the Del Toro one. If you haven't seen our other episode on the Del Toro Pinocchio, you can find it in our on our channel. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, this one's a lot closer. We have all the characters. We got Geppetto, and Tom Hanks does a pretty good job as Geppetto. Even has an Italian accent, and and we have Cleo the goldfish, and Figaro is even
Mm-hmm.
there. So I feel like we got all the main characters, the main elements in it.
A
Um,
question, real quick. Is there any point in that movie where Figaro is an actual cat, or is Figaro just always an animated cat in that movie?
I think he's always an animated cat.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't think they ever used a real cat for Figaro,
Yeah.
but
Well, I mean, like he's so emotive, like he.
yeah,
I mean, I don't know how much of the old animation that
I
you got
watched a
to
little
watch.
bit of it. Yeah,
Well, most of Figaro's stuff is at the beginning, but he's quite a
yeah,
character. He's very emotive, so it'd be kind of hard, I think, to see Figaro
mm-hmm.
as a real cat, like an actual real cat, even though it's a live action movie. But
Mm-hmm.
it would be so
Yeah,
boring if it was just a regular cat. It wouldn't really be
yeah.
Figaro.
No, you're right. You're right. Just like if they used a regular goldfish,
Yeah.
you just wouldn't want that.
Can you imagine Dumbo with like a real elephant and he only
China.
did elephant stuff?
I mean, yeah. Imagine them trying to make a Lion King where they tried to use like real looking like cats and see like with like no type of emotive CGI. Like that just sounds silly. They would never do something like that dumb. Please
uh,
continue with what you were saying.
that's passive aggressive. Um, so, a common thing that they have with the Del Toro version is that Geppetto had a son that passed away, or is implied to have passed away. So, not sure why there was a need to add this element. I'm not like completely objected to it, but I feel like it's not necessary because maybe it's just me, but I just always thought of Geppetto as a guy who just never had a family and wished for one.
Mhm.
And for, you know, Pinocchio being, wish upon a star and stuff, it's all about wishing and how
Mhm.
he gets his wish granted. And his wish that is granted is for a family and that he wanted a son that he never had. And I think that it means more to wish for a son that he never had.
As opposed to wishing to replace a son.
Exactly. Because then why wouldn't he be wishing for his son to come back to life instead
Hmm.
of wishing for a puppet to be a real boy. Like I love that puppet so much that I want it to be real and like its own person and not the son that I lost. So I feel I like I said, I don't completely object to it because I feel like it gives Geppetto more character, but I also feel like it takes away something that the way that I had originally seen Geppetto is a little bit skewed now. It's different and not true to what how I viewed him before.
Right. No, I can understand that. And one of the things that's nice about this movie, though, is at least when Pinocchio comes to life, he's not an utter annoyance like he is in the Del Toro version. Um, but also right before that, I don't know how I felt about this. I get it was not it was cute that Disney did this, and I understood why, but they made it so that the clocks that are in Geppetto's shop in the original one, they were just kind of random clocks. A couple of them were kind of creepy. Like to me as a kid looking at those clocks, I was like, these things are very, very strange. Like a turkey about to get its head cut off, and like I think someone spanking a baby, and like police officers or something. Like it seemed all very strange to me in the animated version. But in this one, they kind of like made. They have a couple of like just original clocks, but there's also a lot of reference clocks that are from a whole bunch of different Disney properties. And so for me, it kind of took me out of the movie for a second when I saw all of it because a lot of times when you find these Easter eggs, they're kind of like hidden in the background and they're kind of like cleverly done. This one didn't feel clever to me. It kind of just felt like in your face. Yeah, look at that, look at that, look at that, and I was just like, whoa, whoa. So like it's a little thing. It's not a big deal, but it did throw me off initially when I saw that in the movie.
I disagree. I don't think that it's supposed to be an Easter egg. I think it was just supposed to be kind of like a fun homage because he did have all these clocks
Hmm.
in the original animation, but Pinocchio was one of the early cartoons, and so all these other cartoons didn't exist yet. And I'm sure that if they did, they would have been the clocks.
Hmm.
Um, but I mean, I kind of liked it because the original clocks were interesting, but I feel like they're more interesting because
Hmm.
we know these characters, and so I feel like
Hmm.
it's kind of fun to see um, those cartoons that we know as clocks. More so, like I feel more connected to those clocks than I did to the ones in the original animation. I do like that they kept the part where like Jiminy's like kind of resting his hand on
On the
something,
weird booty.
but then you zoom out and then like you see that yeah, it's this woman who's like glaring down at him. So I thought that was funny because I was like, I remember that. Like
Yeah.
because I watched the original cartoon after I watched all the other ones, the
Hmm.
current ones from 2022. So that was one of the moments where it was like, oh, you guys are doing good, like being giving me this nostalgia. So I would disagree with you. I like the clocks, and I also kind of like the idea that they kind of gave Geppetto a business where
Hmm.
and he's like unwilling to sell the clocks, but they're so good that
People want to buy
people
them.
want to buy them and that's how he makes a living and stuff. So kind of
Wait, if how does but that's the question. How does he make a living if he doesn't sell clocks at a clock shop?
because he sells other stuff, other toy. He's a toy maker, and he
Right.
also makes
Oh.
clocks. But his clocks are really cool. I think he
I
said
guess just
something about like he doesn't want to sell them because his wife loved them or something.
yeah, they like I can't I think that's right. And like they definitely were trying to make they're trying to make Geppetto more well-rounded and they want you to kind of get this sense of Geppetto's family. And I do like I it's hard for me to remember, but I do think that you're right that it had to deal with his wife. Because one of the jokes I was gonna say was just like it's kind of funny that he didn't make himself like a wooden effigy of his like his lost wife instead of making a wooden effigy of their son. So or making a wooden effigy of both of them. Considering that this is now about a Geppetto who has lost his family. Um, but yeah, because he lost his wife in this movie and he lost his son, and like as far as what is driving him to make these make Pinocchio is the fact that he lost somebody. So it's like, okay, well, he also lost his wife. But this is a nice way of saying, well, he held on to the clocks for her memory, and then when it came to Pinocchio himself, it's like this is supposed to be the representation of the memory of my son, I guess, even though it's almost kind of like we were talking about earlier, where
Mm-hmm.
it gets a little murky because it's also kind of like a replacement for your son.
Yeah. I I do feel like this take on it was a little bit interesting. This is why I feel like adding a family that Geppetto had but doesn't have anymore really changes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because then it makes you question like why is he making Pinocchio and wanting Pinocchio to be real instead of what he's actually lost. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but he does you know contrast to Del Toro's Geppetto, makes Pinocchio out of passion and not sadness.
True.
And that's why we get a more, you know, well-rounded with, nice features. It's just a very well-made with care uh, puppet character that looks just like the cartoon. Um as opposed to like Del Toro's kind of wonky, crazy, scary looking Pinocchio. But um,
Right.
but yeah, it's it's hard because these live action ones tend to they make try to make it longer, so they have to flesh it out and add all this other stuff and kind of bring it more up to date for the modern viewer as opposed to like
Mm-hmm.
cartoons that are really simple, and they're sometimes so simple where it's got like major plot holes for like things that don't make any sense. But this seems kind of be the reverse where like they're adding things that are making me be like, well, it doesn't make sense anymore. um
Mm-hmm.
but uh but they do make some good changes. I really liked what they did with the blue fairy. They
Mm-hmm.
totally changed that up, which I think that's great. Love the cast. I think another thing that was interesting is that the blue fairy never sings in the animation, and so I kind of thought it was cool where they didn't have Jiminy sing at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning, but they have the blue fairy sing, and she doesn't start, and I don't think she actually sings when you wish upon a star, but she sings part of the song, starting with "Fate is kind." She
Mm-hmm.
brings to those who love, and that's like kind of I think part of the song that not most people remember because it's not the
Right.
iconic memorable part, but I kind of
Right.
love that because they're they're not like hitting you on the head with a hammer like this is wish
Mm-hmm.
upon a star.
Nostalgia, nostalgia, feel the
Yeah.
nostalgia.
But it's part of it is this is when you wish upon a star, but it's the part of the song that still sounds familiar to you, but maybe you don't remember this part of it. So it's a little bit more along the subtle part of it's more subtle, and so I thought it was very tasteful. um I don't know how you feel about Blue Fairy, but I really like what they did with Blue Fairy.
Oh yeah, like that stuff. That stuff's all really cool. I was actually just thinking it's interesting that there's a lot of this movie that, like, this movie does something that I think is interesting for whenever you're going to make another adaptation of something that already exists, especially if it's already in a visual medium like a movie. But this movie takes there's a lot of scenes that are very similar. Like there's a lot of beats that are almost beat for beat the same that happen in the animated Disney version. But this movie takes certain like chances in different areas to try and shift it up a little bit so that things aren't exactly the same. You saw the animated version recently, so you can remind me, but I don't actually ever remember Pinocchio making it to school in the original animated version. And so it's funny that he actually makes it to school in this one. Like he gets distracted for a little bit, and then Jiminy's able to like redirect him to go back to school, and he actually makes it to school. And they added this element of he was kicked out of school because he wasn't a real boy. And so I was just like, okay, so now this is an interesting world. So like they're clearly, I mean, and of course even in the animated version you could say it's the same thing, but like they clearly are like used to magical things happening. So when they see a wooden boy walk into their classroom, they're not even like questioning, oh my gosh, there's a wooden boy. They're just like, you can't be here because this is for children. So that's a like and that's an interesting element that they added for the this live action Pinocchio that wasn't in the original animated one.
But what I thought was interesting was they actually had the fox and the cat kind of character that was in the original animation. And they're just like walking around the street and they're like
Yeah.
clothes and everything. Like you would like in a cartoon, it's like, all right, yeah, I buy that. But then in a live action movie, they kept it. They kept the characters and they made them look very close to what they look like in the animation. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that because again, like they're not changing so much. Like they're kind of keeping really close to the original animation. And I like that because like the original animation was good. Like why are
Mm-hmm.
we changing it? And I see a lot of the live action movies are changing stuff like that. Well, like let's modernize it. Like it wouldn't make sense to have a fox and a cat walking around
Right.
in clothes in the street. So let's
Yeah.
take that out and make them normal people. And like while I would accept that in a live action movie, I'm kind of glad that they kept it.
Yeah,
So
and and I think that they're the only like, well, I mean the seagull talks, but they're the only kind of like
Seagull doesn't really
anthropomorphic.
talk. I think
Yeah,
it was just that Pinocchio understood him.
understood, right. But yeah, there's a only like I think the fox and the cat are the only anthropomorphic animals in the entire movie. I think everybody else is basically human until we get to like Pleasure Island, which is basically humans that turn into animals, and even then they're walking out on four legs instead of two. So it's funny because of the fact that it doesn't necessarily make sense, but at the same time it's like whatever, it's fine. So I also liked having their inclusion. I liked hearing these songs again, and that's the thing. Like a lot of these songs like returned, so it's cool to hear them after like not hearing it for oh my gosh, like 20 plus years or something now. So maybe 25 years. Like it's been a long time. Um, and it's crazy that you realize, oh yeah, I still know these songs.
Yeah,
Um,
I remember. Yeah, because I remember when I was rewatching the animation. Like
mhm.
you remember. Everyone remembers when you wish upon a star, but then you forget about all these other songs that are in Pinocchio. But they're all so memorable, and you like. I forgot that they were all there. Like, I got no strings on me. Hi,
I remember
diddly
that.
actor's life for me.
An actor's life for me.
I just yeah, like I just like I know them and I remember them when you remind me of them, but I never
But you
like
didn't remember, yeah, didn't think
then
about them in a long
yeah, I just
time.
don't think about them. But now that like I watch it again and like I'm just like these songs were good.
Yeah, there's a
This
lot of memorable songs in Pinocchio.
yeah
So, and then so this does a pretty faithful like job of being like basically like we were talking about earlier, like a lot of the similar beats. There are a couple of little differences, but there's one big divergence that they make that's not in the original Disney animated Disney version, and that is they added a new character to the troupe that Pinocchio ends up becoming a part of briefly, and it's this lady, this girl who has one leg and who is another puppeteer and uses that puppet to speak with Pinocchio, because Pinocchio, especially at one point when Pinocchio gets to the point where he doesn't want to trust humans or people because he gets betrayed. So she uses the puppet and to pretend like she's talking through the puppet. And there are times you're just like, is she really talking through that puppet? That puppet seems very much like it's moving on its own. Like, I don't know how this girl is doing this.
She's
She must be
that
very
good.
talented.
Yeah.
Right? She must be very talented. Yeah. And they add this whole little subplot about the puppeteers, although we don't really see the rest of them. The puppeteers basically coming together to try to take back the troop from this guy who's clearly a jerk and causing a lot of problems. Um, so yeah, and so that is like a real. That's the biggest change, and then it comes back later where she comes and she asks Pinocchio to join the troop, and he's like, I have to go save my father and stuff like that. So like that's the biggest change that they added. I'd be curious, like, what did you think about that change? How did you feel, especially since you saw both recently?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really oppose having this new character. I think it was kind of a nice addition because I feel like it doesn't really take away anything, but it doesn't add too much. It's nice to have a female character in this movie besides the blue fairy who's barely in it. So I feel like it is very nice that they made this effort to try to add a female character to this very male heavy story.
I forgot. There are no female characters besides the blue fairy in the original Pokemon Pinocchio movie.
Well, I mean, there's Cleo. But they also add the seagull, Sophia, which is another female
Mm.
technically. Um, but yeah, the only thing that was weird for me about the puppeteer is that she's also a ventriloquist, and I'm not sure
Yes.
why because Pinocchio's like eyes are here, she's up there. He wouldn't know any better because he's
Mhm.
not looking up. He doesn't even know that she's doing the puppeting. So why would he like yeah, that I felt like that was like unnecessary. I'm not sure why because the ventriloquism is like we're seeing that, not him. So it
Yeah.
almost feels like she's trying to conceal it from us, but we're like we know because we see you, doing the
Yeah, and
strings.
we can see the strings, and
Yeah.
Pinocchio can also see the strings, and he's not thinking about it. So, yeah, I see what you're saying. There's no need to make her a ventriloquist. It's only for us, the
Mhm.
audience, because yeah, you're right. The character of Pinocchio, if he's not responding to the fact that this puppet has strings on, and the puppet's mouth isn't even moving when it talks, or is it? Actually, I
I
can't
think it
remember.
is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, never mind, but it still has strings.
Yeah.
So, and he doesn't. That's the whole point. But
Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, I like the effort that they did to kind of change the film for the better without really impacting the story so much. Because adding that bit didn't actually change the
mhm.
story any too much more than the other things that they changed.
Yeah,
Um, the weird thing though that they did was they had these weird smoke monsters at Pleasure Island, and
at Pleasure Island.
I don't
Yeah,
understand why they're not just like people like they were in the original one. Like it's just another weird thing that like there's already some weird unexplainable things like, the fox and the cat like,
hmm
being like kind of bizarre. But
right.
then now we have these smoke monsters. I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know if there's anything about that maybe in the original Italian story. Maybe that's where it came from. I kind of doubt it a little
Probably not. Yeah,
bit. But who knows? I don't really know. I don't really know why I didn't just make them people like they did in the original animation. That
maybe I feel like maybe they might have made them like smoke monsters just because to try to make it more of a kid-friendly movie and not. Actually, I don't even know because part of me is like maybe it's supposed to be like more kid-friendly and not be like all like these people that are child trafficking. I mean, the thing is, even the original Pinocchio, when I saw that scene where like kids were turning into donkeys, like it freaked me out. Especially because there's a scene, if I remember correctly, like they show his shadow on the wall and stuff, and I'm like, that part of the film felt like a horror movie for me as a kid. Like I remember not enjoying that sequence, and so and I don't know if like shadow creatures make that easier to digest or not. Um, yeah, it's a very odd change. And one of the things that always gets me about the Pinocchio story is the fact that a lot of these branches, like it's really feels like just an adventure. We having different adventures, but these adventures don't necessarily see a conclusion because the fact is we never find out what happens to those kids. I mean, in the chat they were talking about in the story what happens to those kids in the book or in the novel, but and as far as the movies go, so Pinocchio just leaves. Pinocchio just leaves. There's no rescue for these kids. They don't get turned back to normal. We don't know what happens to them, and I'm just like, yo, what about those kids you left? All those children. And then this movie, I might be misremembering, but it feels like they added more kids to Pleasure Island than what I remember. But I guess there were a few. I remember a few in the animated one, but there's a lot of kids in Pleasure Island in this movie, and Pleasure Island is huge.
It no, it's pretty similar to the
Okay.
animation. There were a lot of kids, and actually there's some really like crushing moments in the animation where like like cuz they're like Pinocchio sees the donkeys and he was like, "Where are they from? Like where are these donkeys from?" And then he's just kind of watching, and then he sees like some of these one donkey says like, I want to go home, I want to go home to my mom. And then the guy, I forget his name, the guy who's like running this business is like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
this one's like not fully turned, and they get separated. And I'm like, oh my god, this is for kids. I
Yeah.
remember being terrified. But I those earlier Disney movies, such as Snow White.
Fantasia.
What? Which
I
one?
said Fantasia.
Fantasia. No. Well, actually, yeah, that one was scary
Yeah.
too. Yeah, Fantasia, Snow White was scary. Pinocchio was scary, and I was really scared of Maleficent too.
Maleficent.
That
I was
one
just
was
thinking Sleeping Beauty.
scary. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are like the early films, the first major Disney animations. They were all so scary. Um,
Right.
but that just kind of goes to show, the time period of what was acceptable for children to watch, or what they thought was acceptable for children to watch. Like for years they were doing this, and it's common. So I'm not like surprised of
Hmm.
how like scary this is. Like I'm not saying like, I'm just not like questioning like, why did they make this for kids?
Right. Now, you have to remind me, but I feel like I remember in the original, they were also smoking and drinking.
Yes, they were.
Okay. And in this movie, obviously they weren't smoking because we've started seeing a lot less smoking in movies in general nowadays. But they're drinking, and I don't know if they're drinking beer, but I want to say they're drinking beer.
I think they
Are they
said that it was alcohol
root
free
beer?
beer.
I think it was like root beer. Okay, yeah, I don't think it was
They,
alcoholic because I was like, Disney's not gonna
yeah,
have them have. They're not gonna
yeah.
have underage drinking on their
I'm pretty
thing.
sure they said, somebody said that it wasn't alcoholic.
Okay, and one thing I thought was interesting because I wasn't sure if they were going to do this in modern day Disney because in the original movie they also like the kid says, "Hey, what do you think I am, a jackass?" And we know that that can be used as a swear word, even though we know that it actually is meant to describe a donkey. So I wasn't sure if they would actually say that or if it would constitute cursing, but they actually say it. He still says the exact same line in the movie as he's turning into a donkey, and just like in the animated one there is no saving them. They just kind of Pinocchio leaves, and we just kind of forget about those kids. So, and I feel like this is another change. But like when he gets to the point where he finds out where Geppetto is, they do they do this thing where he actually gets his ears and his tail turned back to normal, um, before he actually goes and finds Geppetto. When I feel like in the original Disney one, he had those basically until the end of the movie.
He. Are you talking about the ears and stuff?
Yeah, the donkey ears, since he was half transformed.
Yeah, because I remember wondering about that too. But at some point, the blue fairy comes back and then turns
Hmm.
him back into a regular wooden boy.
Okay, and that's is that before they go to Monstro
Um, I think so. No, no, he has the ears and the tail
when they're at Mon? That's
when
what I
they're
thought
in Monstro. Yeah, because that's when he's reunited with
with Geppetto.
Geppetto, and he's like, "Why do you have ears and a
Yeah.
tail?"
Right. Yeah. So this one they decided to just remove that, and they also changed how they meet again, because one of the things that happens in the original Disney one is that Geppetto ends up in Monstro, and he's just there, and like Pinocchio just and eventually finds him. But the fact is, you hear about how Geppetto went to go look for him, and they ended up in and they end up in Monstro in this one, like separately, but in this one, Pinocchio is actually able to meet up with Geppetto just as Monstro appears.
They get eaten
And so,
together. Yeah.
yeah, so they changed it so that they're eating together. One of the funny things, though, I did appreciate, even though it is another change, is that when Pinocchio does make it to Geppetto and he's shouting to Geppetto everything that's happened about all the things that he did and all this other stuff. I love this moment when Geppetto just looks at him and says, "You did all that in one day?" And I was like, "Oh wow, it has been one day." And I was like, "Was it one day in the original movie?" Now I'm just confused.
Yeah. No,
So
it's
that
funny.
was nice.
I remember that. Yeah, I wrote that down too because I thought it's funny. Everything that you mentioned so far, I've also written down in my
Nice, big
notes.
notes.
um, but yeah, in the original animation, Pinocchio goes home after he escapes Pleasure Island, finds out that Geppetto's not home, and then I forget, he hears that from, I think the blue fairy tells him or something. Somebody tells him
Someone tells him what
that
happened.
Geppetto um got eaten by Monstro,
Hmm.
and so he goes looking for Monstro, and so he actually, like, he ties a rock to his donkey tail, and then
Oh, that's
he's
right.
like
And he's walking
walking on the
underwater.
floor
I
looking for
forgot
Monstro,
about
and he's like
that.
asking the fish, like, have you seen
Monstro, have you seen
Monstro?
Monstro? Oh my
Yeah.
lord. That's crazy. I
Yeah.
haven't thought about that in forever and I'm remembering
I
it.
kind of wish they kept that.
Yeah, maybe they thought it would have been too challenging to animate, and they weren't trying to make the third underwater filmed movie of that year to go along with Avatar and Wakanda Forever. So they're like, we'll stay above water on this for this one.
Right.
So, and then like the way that the movie ends, is a little different than what I remember. Well, I guess it's generally the same, but like the last shot where, which I kind of like, where they show Pinocchio walking, and you hear Geppetto, you hear Jiminy kind of like talking about Pinocchio and if he ever became a real boy. But as he's walking, you see like the wood start to disappear, and like at the very last shot, you can see that he is a real boy, but you don't really get to see him before the credits roll. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that ending.
Yeah, I guess so.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, did you prefer the original?
I mean, not necessarily. Cause like in the original, he actually does like turn into a real boy, but it's still animation, so he looks still very similar to what he looked like as a puppet. It's just like a
Mhm.
little bit smoother.
Right.
So I mean, it's, yeah. I have no opinion. I think I have more opinion about the things that the plot holes that they could have fixed but chose not to fix which is like you had mentioned, they never go back to try to save the rest of the boys at Pleasure Island in any of the versions that, well, I guess there's only two that have the Pleasure Island, which is
Mm-hmm.
the both Disney versions. And then um, the other thing is they never try to fix the whole thing about how Geppetto just sends Pinocchio to school and expects Pinocchio to know where
To
school
make
is.
it.
Yeah, by himself. And of course, that's how, the whole thing starts with him getting lost.
Actually, if you think about it, even in the Del Toro version, we actually never find out what happened to those boys at the war training facility on that
Yeah.
island.
So it's kind
So
of the same thing. Like,
yeah.
nobody seems to really care about what happens to the other boys
The
in
other
any
children.
any really, yeah. And even in the Del Toro one, they don't have Geppetto just kind of expects Pinocchio to know where school is. So
Right. Oh, and I just remember. So I did remember something because we are. This is actually turning out into our longest episode. But they added a new song in this movie, didn't they? Like when they're on the caravan and they're going to the they're going to Pleasure Island. There's a song that they do like in the caravan with the other kids, and I think that was an original song for this movie. I wanted to ask what you thought about that.
yeah, that one was I think I was a little checked out at the time. But I do remember the guy, the coachman. He's the guy who plays Gaston in the live action movie.
Beauty and the Beast.
I love that guy. Yeah, the live action Beauty and the Beast. I like that actor. He's in like everything that I like.
Nice, nice.
Or I think I just like the things that he's in because
That he's
he's in
in. Yes, he's in it.
it.
Yeah. I feel like for me, like I think the song was fine. I didn't remember. I just remember being like, "Oh, this is a new number," and
Yeah.
I think I overall enjoyed it. I didn't think it was like a bad addition or anything. So
I
I
almost
appreciate it.
feel like they put it in there for him, for the
Yeah,
actor, because
they probably
yeah,
did.
because he does stuff like that. So, I mean, I
Nice.
would, if I was casting him, I'd be like, yeah, let's give him a song.
Right. So, real quick, any other big notes that you wanted to say that you weren't able to say yet?
Just real quick, I really think that Joseph Levitt Gordon did a great job as Jiminy, and like, I didn't even know it was him. But
Hmm.
after I found out that it was him, I was like, good job, man, good job.
Yes, Joseph Gordon-Levitt did a really good job. He has a lot of range. He's really good. Um, but yeah, all right then. Well, if you guys want to hear us talk about this a little bit more, we talk about this and a whole bunch of other topics on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/3 films. It'd be great to see you guys over there. But what did you guys think about the live action Pinocchio? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you think that the live action version made improvements on the original Disney one? Do you think that the original Disney one is better? Have you seen the Del Toro Pinocchio story, and do you prefer that kind of more traditional to the original Italian novel type of movie and type of story? Whatever you thought about it, comment below. Let us know. And while you're down there, if you give us a like, share, subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and I got no strings on me.